What's up, guys? Brady Fugel here, coming at you with a review of the new Revocation album, New Gods, New Masters, released last Friday, September 26th. Here we have the 9th album from Revocation, one of the most beloved and acclaimed acts in modern extreme metal and modern death metal. Although this band is definitely much more encompassing than just being straight up death metal. They're just as much death metal, arguably, as they are modern thrash. They incorporate a good amount of genuine technicality and at times some progressive influence to where technical death metal, progressive death metal don't really seem that much of outlandish labels. Something that I've always enjoyed about this band's music, at least from the albums that I'm familiar with, which isn't all of them, but take a record like Chaos of Forms, for instance, their 2011 record, it's just the riffs. If a big draw to metal and especially extreme metal for you is some great technical but yet catchy, groovy, any positive adjective I can describe guitar riffs with, if that's a draw to you, then Revocation, if you haven't already listened to them, I would highly recommend, because the riffing on all their catalog, including this album, is probably the biggest draw to them, at least for me. But this record was a little different in a sense, because the riffs are still there, don't get me wrong, but the main draw to me with this record, after listening to it this last, 9 days now, has been just the overall mood of this record, given the lyrical themes, which New Gods, New Masters, the title is referencing AI, in a sense that it's saying that AI is now the new god, I guess would be a good way to put it. There's obviously much more nuance than just that within this album lyrically. But going off of that, the band did a really good job on this record of incorporating a prominent, kind of eerie, dystopian type, futuristic mood in the majority of these tracks. It's also fitting that the record came out just before October to me, because it almost does have somewhat of a spookiness to it that's fitting of this time of year. I think the opening title track is a really good example of all of these points that I'm making. I mean, just from that brooding intro chord progression utilizing the tremolo riffs, that just sounds really unsettling. In the midsection, when the song gets quiet, you get these guitar harmonies that almost do kind of have a horror-esque lurk or spooky quality to them. Also, that bouncy thrash riffing in the verses, they just have some slightly ominous melodies. Not in a way that I maybe would make them blackened, but just in a way that kind of has somewhat of an eerie horror tinge to them. And I think that was very fitting for this record, because it's not something that is outright pushed to the forefront. It's just kind of subtle influences here and there that give it that flair. Track 2, Sarcophagi of the Soul, is another track that does that really well. There's just some eerie, melancholic melodies in there. And then one of my favorite riffs on the whole album is in this song, right at the 118 mark. It's just this groovy-ass triplet riff that kind of creeps in at first, and then it just gets launched in full throttle when that double bass gets thrown under it. Both of these songs also have really climactic and driving lead parts and guitar solos. That's going to be a compliment of mine that I have throughout this entire record, but these two tracks in particular do a really good job of starting this album off with a bang, establishing a prominent mood that is very fitting of the lyrical theme. Track 3, Confines of Infinity, is another solid addition to this record. I do think the addition of Travis Ryan from Cattle Decapitation was a good addition to this song. He does sound very distinct, and especially his really low guttural vocals and his almost black metal leaning shrieks. He definitely adds a lot to this song, and as a result, the song definitely sticks out vocally among the rest of the album. It doesn't quite lean in as much to my ears into that overall mood of this album, like I mentioned. And it also does feel a little bit long, in my opinion. The bridge, I think, is great. It's got this again, sort of that melancholic type vibe to it, and another really cool solo. But I think the song should have ended right after that solo, because that intro part comes back and it goes on, I think, twice as long, and it just kind of ends up feeling unnecessary. I think the track would have been a lot more memorable, I guess, and repeatable if it was kind of cut a little bit short and left you wanting more. But the intro part itself is just so fucking towering. The dissonant, slow-paced march of those verses I thought was really unique too, and very infectious. Still a good song. I wish that it was just trimmed up maybe a little bit. Buried Epoch, the closer, is another one that I think was just a little bit long. It does have some cool intro melodies. But especially this being near the end of the record, aside from that melodic break in the middle with those lead sections that kind of pop in and out, the song overall ends up being a little bit forgettable. The riffs are slightly more dull than others on here. And yeah, this one just felt a little bit long also, although I will say I do like the tremolo part that comes in at the end. Also the track Cronenberged, which is actually a song that I liked as a single. In the full album context, it doesn't work quite as well for me. It just feels a little bit like filler, and it's probably the most forgettable song on here, even with the feature of Johnny Davey from Job for a Cowboy. He is very distinct on this song, but aside from, I guess, those galloping type verses and his vocal parts, I don't really think this song serves much of a unique purpose on this record. So we got the strong beginning of this record, like I complimented, and we have the somewhat underwhelming end to it, like you just heard me discuss. Now getting into the meat of the record, there is the track The All-Seeing, which is an instrumental, which does have some very memorable parts. It's got that really methodical stomp in the main riff that I think is cool, and the techie intro. Those almost dissonant, ugly-sounding melodies somewhat fittingly do resemble, machinery noises, I guess would be a good way of putting it. As is the case for the majority of instrumental tracks on any album I listen to, I haven't really been coming back to this track. I think a lot of it, in just it being an instrumental, a lot of times I think a reason why I don't come back to instrumentals very much is because with instrumentals, a lot of times it's a lot of individual parts being added onto songs rather than a song with a chorus or a song with a memorable verse riff or an intro riff that kind of comes back several times. This song kind of just keeps going and changing the whole time. So if there is a part that I like, it really only comes around one time. And this song definitely does fit that mold. The solo at the end from Gilad Hexelman, I'm not sure if I said that right, is cool. The lead guitar in this song is phenomenal. Just getting that out there. But I didn't really like how the tone, as far as the actual lead guitar itself on Gilad's solo, it sounds so different than the rest of the song. It almost does feel like a one song, and another song just kind of got cut and pasted in there with the solo in its tone in particular. But style-wise and performance-wise, they did awesome on this song. And the three other tracks that I haven't talked about yet, Dystopian Vermin, Despiritualized, and Data Corpse, are also pretty good, not gonna lie. Dystopian Vermin just has this steamrolling intro riff that's, again, really groovy and has some double bass behind it that just gives it that extra sense of urgency. The tom sections that kind of are in between the verses, I think, do a good job of splitting up the song. At the 158 mark, the triplet shift that happens does dial back the energy a little bit, but it's followed up by another really cool solo that's cool, and after that you get somewhat of a Slayer part in a way. There was also the tempo change near the end that really maybe doesn't do too much to progress the song, but overall this is still a track that I've enjoyed and I haven't been skipping over. Despiritualized also, it kind of has these tuneful, clean guitars in the intro, which I thought was pretty cool. But then the song just ends up crashing into these straight up death metal type verses with, again, some more groovy riffing. And I guess the track does have a good three-way intersection between this band's multiple influences, the death, the thrash, and the prog. But the solo brings back some more of those melodic type ideas, and the song is still good. I just think it might be suffering from somewhat of an identity crisis a little bit. But Data Corpse is great. One of my favorite parts on the entire record is actually on this song, in the outro. How that main riff is a lot more straightforward. It's just straight to the point. It's, I guess you can call it maybe a mosh riff in a way, but it's nice because it breaks things up on this record. It gives you a chance to kind of breathe a little bit and settle into something familiar that you don't really have to spend a lot of time dissecting in a way. This is something that I think Gojira has always done really well, especially on the more progressive stuff, like Way of All Flesh, for instance. The song Toxic Garbage Island is a great example of that on that record. And this song kind of does serve a similar role, although there are parts in this track that are a little bit more nuanced and technical. The way it ends, I think, is just a great way to kind of settle things down a little bit for the better. And overall, the song ends up having some of the most memorable riffing on the entire record, which just goes to show how far something like that can get you on a nuanced, technical extreme metal record. Overall, there's a lot to really enjoy on here. there were just a few criticisms I had that didn't really bring down the entire record, but just maybe made a few tracks have some winsable moments, and maybe there's a couple on here that I would skip altogether. I think maybe my only album-wide criticism is that vocalist David Davidson doesn't really have a whole lot of personality as a vocalist. I think that's the best way of putting it. He doesn't sound bad whatsoever, and his vocals do fit the music. They're kind of just a bit vanilla in the extreme metal context for me. But production-wise, I think this record is awesome. The bass in particular sounds really good, and it is very audible the way it cuts through the mix like that, which is always something I like to hear, especially in extreme metal. And the lead guitars, like I mentioned, are the absolute MVP of this record. Because the guitars in general, the solos and the riffs, in true Revocation style, are the most memorable aspect of this album for me. This album gets a 25 out of 30 for me. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. If you've heard this album, please comment below your thoughts on it. Remember to hit subscribe for more rock and metal-related content, and check the description for all my links. Until next time, once again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys later. Peace.